The crack of the whip echoed through Dustwillow, Wyoming's central square, silencing the crowd that had gathered to witness Punishment Day in the summer of 1878. Sienna Blackwood's scream pierced the air as the leather bit into her back for the third time, tearing through her already shredded dress. Her crime: stealing a loaf of bread and 2 apples from Hargrove's general store to feed her ailing younger sister. "That's for thieving, girl," Sheriff Denton bellowed, his face flushed red under the midday sun. "5 more to go, and maybe next time you'll think twice before taking what ain't yours." Sienna's knees buckled as she clung to the wooden post she was tied to, her fingers white with strain. At 19, she'd never imagined finding herself here, publicly flogged before the entire town. But with their parents 2 months dead from fever and her 15-year-old sister Sophia battling the same illness, Sienna had grown desperate. The money had run out last week. The food yesterday. "Please," she whispered, though no one close enough could hear. "My sister needs medicine." Sheriff Denton raised the whip again, its shadow falling across Sienna's bloodied back. The crowd watched in uncomfortable silence. Punishment for theft was common in these parts, but many felt whipping a young woman was excessive, especially one known to be caring for a sick sister alone. The whip whistled through the air, but before it could strike, a tall figure stepped between Sienna and the sheriff. "That's enough." The voice was low, steady, commanding. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Xavier Foster caught the whip mid-air, wrapping it around his leather-gloved hand. Blood immediately seeped through the glove where the whip had sliced through. "Step aside, Foster," Sheriff Denton growled. "Justice is being served here." Xavier didn't move. At 25, he'd built a reputation as one of the territory's finest horsemen and cattle drivers. His ranch outside of town was modest but growing, and most importantly, he paid his men fair wages and dealt honestly with everyone. Few were willing to cross him. "If justice is what you're after," Xavier said, loud enough for all to hear, "then I'll take the rest of her punishment." Sheriff Denton's eyes widened in surprise. "You'll what?" "The law says she gets 8 lashes for food theft. She's had 3. I'll take the remaining 5. A murmur swept through the crowd. The sheriff looked uncertain. "That's not how punishment works, Foster." "Actually," came another voice as Judge Wilson stepped forward from the crowd, "there is precedent. A man can take punishment for a woman if he's willing. Old territorial law from back when the Mormons were settling." Sheriff Denton's mouth twisted in frustration. "Fine, have it your way." Xavier removed his shirt, handing it to his ranch hand, Timothy, who stood nearby. He took Sienna's place at the post as Timothy quickly cut her bonds. Sienna collapsed, barely conscious, and was caught by several women from the crowd who rushed forward. "You'll regret this interference, Foster," Denton muttered, winding up the whip. Xavier's eyes never left Sienna's crumpled form. "No, I won't." The first lash cut across his back, but Xavier didn't flinch. By the 5th, blood ran freely down his spine, but he remained standing, his hands steady on the post. When it was finished, Xavier straightened, his face pale but composed. He walked to where Sienna was being tended by Mrs. Palmer, the midwife. "Where does your sister live?" He asked Sienna softly, her eyes, glazed with pain, focused on him with effort. "Small cabin, north end of town, yellow door." Xavier nodded. "Timothy, get my wagon. Mrs. Palmer, can you help me get Miss Blackwood and her sister to my ranch? They'll need proper care." "What makes you think you can just take them?" Sheriff Denton interrupted, coiling his whip. Xavier turned, his blue eyes hard as steel. "The punishment's been served, Sheriff. What I do now is my business. The girl's a thief." "The girl was desperate," Mrs. Palmer interjected. "And you've made your point. The Foster Ranch is as good a place as any for her to recover, better than that drafty cabin with no one to tend them properly." Judge Wilson nodded his agreement. "The debt to the law is paid. Let them go, Denton." The sheriff spat on the ground but didn't argue further. Within the hour, Xavier's wagon was loaded with Sienna's few belongings, and Timothy had gently carried Sophia, burning with fever, wrapped in blankets. Xavier drove slowly out of town, ignoring the pain of his own wounds while Mrs. Palmer tended to Sienna in the back of the wagon. "Why did you do that?" Sienna whispered, her voice barely audible over the creak of wagon wheels. "You don't even know me." Xavier kept his eyes on the road ahead. "I know enough. Nobody deserves to be whipped for trying to save their sister." "But you took the lashes. Your back will heal," he interrupted gently. "Same as yours. Rest now. We've got a ways to go." Sienna's eyes closed against her will, exhaustion and pain overtaking her. Her last thought before unconsciousness claimed her was of the strange, solemn cowboy who'd stepped between her and the whip, taking her punishment without hesitation. Xavier Foster's ranch house came into view just as the sun began its descent behind the distant mountains. It wasn't grand, a two-story wooden structure with a wide porch and outbuildings scattered behind it, but it was solid and well-maintained. Two ranch hands hurried from the barn to help as the wagon approached. "Get Doc Henderson," Xavier ordered as he carefully climbed down, trying not to show how his back pained him. "Tell him we've got 2 patients needing urgent attention." "Already sent for him, boss," said a lean man with a salt and pepper beard. "Saw you coming up the road. Good work, Jackson." Xavier nodded appreciatively. "We need the guest rooms prepared, and hot water, lots of it." Inside, the house was simply furnished but clean and comfortable. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gunderson, a no-nonsense Norwegian widow, had already turned down beds in the 2 guest rooms and was heating water on the stove. "Such nonsense," she muttered, eyeing Xavier's bloody shirt as Timothy and Jackson carried the sisters upstairs. "Flogging girls in town square like savages." "What is this, the Dark Ages?" "Not now, Mrs. Gunderson," Xavier said tiredly. "Just help Mrs. Palmer with the girls, please." The old woman's expression softened. "Of course. And you'll be needing attention too, young man. Don't think I don't see how you're standing. Doctor." Henderson arrived within the hour, his buggy kicking up dust as he drove into the yard. A gray-haired man with kind eyes and steady hands, he'd been tending to the people of Dustwillow for over 20 years. "Heard what happened in town," he said gruffly as he entered, medical bag in hand. "Denton's always been too quick with that whip." He examined all 3 patients thoroughly, starting with Sophia, whose condition was most critical. "Typhoid, I'd wager," he told Sienna, who insisted on sitting by her sister's bed despite her own injuries. "Been seeing cases throughout the county. She's young and seems strong underneath the fever. With proper care, she has a good chance." He left medicines, detailed instructions, and promised to return the next day. Mrs. Palmer stayed for the night to help, while Xavier reluctantly allowed Mrs. Gunderson to tend to his back. 5 lashes. The housekeeper clicked her tongue as she applied salve to the wounds. "You're a foolish, good-hearted man, Xavier Foster. Your father would be proud." Xavier winced as she wrapped bandages around his torso. "I just did what needed doing. She hummed skeptically. And taking in 2 strange girls was also just what needed doing. They have nowhere else to go. There's the widow Jenkins in town. She takes in strays." Xavier shook his head. "The sheriff would be watching. Besides, the younger one needs constant care." Mrs. Gunderson tied off the bandage and stepped back, hands on her hips. "Well, you've made your bed, so to speak. Get some rest. I'll check on the girls through the night." Xavier slept fitfully, his back throbbing with each heartbeat. Before dawn, he rose, unable to remain still any longer. He found Sienna asleep in a chair beside Sophia's bed, her head resting awkwardly against the wall. In sleep, with her features relaxed, he could see how young she truly was, perhaps 19 or 20. Her dark auburn hair had come loose from its pins and framed a face that, while drawn with exhaustion and worry, was strikingly beautiful. He approached quietly, intending to cover her with a blanket, but her eyes flew open at his footsteps. "Is she?" Sienna straightened, immediately alert. "She's sleeping," Xavier assured her, nodding toward Sophia, whose breathing, while still labored, seemed more regular than the previous evening. "You should be in bed, too. Your back needs healing." Sienna shook her head. "I need to be here when she wakes. Mrs. Gunderson can sit with her for a few hours. You're no good to your sister if you collapse from exhaustion." She looked up at him, really studying him for the first time. His face was handsome but weathered from years under the Wyoming sun, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jawline covered by a day's worth of stubble. His eyes were a deep blue that reminded her of mountain lakes, but it was the kindness in those eyes that made her hesitate. "Why are you helping us, Mr. Foster? Truly?" Xavier pulled up a chair and sat across from her, moving carefully to avoid straining his injuries. "Xavier," he corrected gently, "and I'm helping because it's the right thing to do. Most men in Dustwillow wouldn't have stepped in. They just watched." His expression darkened. "Most men in Dustwillow aren't worth much, then. You don't know us. I could be exactly what they said, a thief." "Are you?" Sienna's chin lifted slightly. "No, I've never stolen anything in my life before yesterday. But Sophia hasn't eaten in 2 days, and the fever was getting worse, and I'd already sold everything of value we had. Your parents? Dead. Typhoid 2 months ago." She swallowed hard. "We were managing until Sophia got sick. I'd been doing laundry for the hotel, but I couldn't leave her alone to work once the fever took hold." Xavier nodded, understanding. "The same illness took my mother when I was 12. A moment of silence passed between them, a quiet acknowledgement of shared loss. "I'll pay you back," Sienna said suddenly. "For the doctor, the medicine, everything. When Sophia's better, I can work. I'm good with numbers, and I can cook, clean, mend." "There'll be time to discuss all that later," Xavier interrupted. "For now, please get some rest." "That's an order, Miss Blackwood." Despite herself, Sienna smiled faintly. "Sienna, and I don't recall agreeing to take orders from you. My house, my rules," he countered, but his tone was light. "There's a perfectly good bed next door with your name on it." She hesitated, glancing at Sophia. "I'll sit with her," Xavier promised. "Any change and I'll wake you immediately." Reluctantly, Sienna agreed. As she stood, she swayed slightly, and Xavier instinctively reached out to steady her, his hand catching her elbow. The touch sent an unexpected warmth through both of them, and their eyes met in surprise. "Thank you," she whispered, and he wasn't certain whether she meant for the support or for everything else. "You're welcome," he replied, his voice suddenly rough. She disappeared into the adjoining room, and Xavier settled into the chair she had vacated, watching over Sophia's restless sleep as the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains. 3 days passed in a blur of fever, medicine, and anxious waiting. Sophia's condition remained critical, with periods of improvement followed by frightening relapses. Sienna barely left her sister's side, and Xavier found himself increasingly concerned for both sisters. On the evening of the 3rd day, Xavier entered the sick room to find Sienna singing softly to Sophia, a lullaby their mother had taught them. He paused in the doorway, unwilling to interrupt the tender moment. Sienna's voice was sweet and clear, despite her exhaustion, and something about the scene made his chest tighten with an unfamiliar ache. When she finished, she looked up and saw him watching. "My mother sang that when we were ill," she explained, slightly embarrassed. "I thought it might comfort her. I'm sure it does, Xavier said, stepping into the room with a tray. Mrs. Gunderson sent up some soup. You need to eat something. Sienna accepted the bowl gratefully. How's your back healing? Better than expected. Yours, she nodded. Doctor. Henderson says I was lucky. No infection. Xavier pulled up a chair across from her. Sienna, I wanted to talk to you about something. Her spoon paused halfway to her mouth. You want us to leave? What? No. He shook his head emphatically. The opposite, actually. I wanted to offer you both a place here, at least until you're back on your feet. Sophia will need time to recover fully, and you need steady work. Sienna's brow furrowed. What kind of work? Mrs. Gunderson has been asking for help with the household accounts for months. I mentioned you're good with numbers. You want me to be your bookkeeper? Xavier nodded. To start with, the ranch is growing. I've just bought another 100 head of cattle and taken on 3 more hands. The paperwork is getting to be too much for me to handle alone. Sienna studied him, searching for an ulterior motive but finding none in his open expression. Why would you trust me with your accounts? You've known me less than a week, and our first meeting wasn't exactly. She trailed off. Call it instinct, he replied. Besides, Mrs. Gunderson is a good judge of character and she likes you. Sienna smiled slightly. She has an interesting way of showing it. That's just her way. So, what do you say? Room and board for both of you, plus wages. Once Sophia's recovered, we can find suitable work for her too if she wants it. It was a generous offer, far more than Sienna had hoped for, but something made her hesitate. People will talk, she said quietly. 2 unmarried women living at a bachelor's ranch. Xavier's expression remained neutral, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of something Sienna couldn't quite identify. Mrs. Gunderson lives here as well and serves as a perfectly respectable chaperone. Besides, I've never much cared what people in town think. Sienna considered this. The alternative was returning to their cabin with no money, no work, and Sophia still weak from illness. All right, she agreed finally. Thank you, Xavier, we accept. He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his face and made him look younger. Good. That's settled then. That night, for the first time since they'd arrived, Sophia's fever broke. By morning she was weak but lucid, her blue eyes so like Sienna's, focusing clearly on her surroundings. Where are we? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sienna, who had fallen asleep in the chair beside the bed, woke instantly. Sophia, oh, thank God. She pressed a hand to her sister's forehead, finding it cool and dry. We're at Xavier Foster's ranch. He's been helping us. Sophia's brow wrinkled in confusion. The cattleman. Why would he help us? Sienna hesitated, unsure how to explain everything that had happened. It's a long story. The important thing is you're getting better. Over the following week, Sophia's strength gradually returned. She was a naturally curious girl, intelligent and observant, and Sienna found it increasingly difficult to avoid telling her the full truth of their situation. Finally, one afternoon as they sat together on the porch swing, Sophia's first venture outside the sick room, the younger sister confronted her directly. Why won't anyone tell me how we really came to be here? Mrs. Gunderson changes the subject. Mr. Foster looks uncomfortable, and you. You're hiding something. I'm not a child, Sienna. Sienna sighed, knowing her sister deserved the truth. Slowly she recounted everything: the theft, the public whipping, Xavier's intervention, and his subsequent offer of shelter and employment. Sophia listened in horror, tears filling her eyes. You were whipped because of me, because I was sick and needed food. No, Sienna said firmly, taking her sister's hands. I was punished because Sheriff Denton is a cruel man who enforces unjust laws. None of this is your fault. And Mr. Foster. He took Lash's meant for you. Why would he do that for a stranger? Sienna shook her head. I've asked myself the same question. He says it was simply the right thing to do. You believe him. I think I do. He's a good man, Sophia, better than most. Sophia studied her sister's face carefully. You like him. Sienna felt heat rise to her cheeks. I respect him. There's a difference. Is there? Sophia smiled faintly. I've seen how you look at him when you think no one's watching. That's enough, Sophia, Sienna admonished, though without heat. We're here because Mr. Foster is generous and we needed help. Nothing more. But even as she said the words, Sienna knew they weren't entirely true. In the 2 weeks they'd been at the ranch, her feelings toward Xavier had grown increasingly complicated. She admired his quiet strength, his fairness with his ranch hands, his gentle way with injured animals. She found herself looking forward to their evening conversations after Sophia had fallen asleep, when they would discuss books or current events, or Xavier would tell stories of his cattle drives. And sometimes, she caught him watching her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. As July gave way to August, life at the Foster Ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. True to his word, Xavier set Sienna to work organizing his accounts, a task she excelled at. Sophia, now fully recovered, insisted on making herself useful, and found she had a natural talent for cooking, much to Mrs. Gunderson's approval. The girl has good instincts, the housekeeper informed Xavier one morning as they watched Sophia confidently rolling out dough for biscuits. Better than yours, that's certain, Xavier smiled. She's a quick learner. Both of them are, Mrs. Gunderson observed shrewdly. That older one has your books in better order than they've ever been. Might be worth keeping them around. Xavier's expression grew thoughtful. That's my intention, if they're willing. The housekeeper gave him a knowing look. Just the books you're interested in keeping in order. Xavier flushed slightly, but was saved from responding by Timothy's arrival with news about a fence that needed mending in the north pasture. That evening, Xavier found Sienna in his study, bent over the ledgers. The lamp cast a warm glow over her features, and she had unconsciously tucked a strand of hair behind her ear as she concentrated. Something about the domestic scene stirred emotions Xavier had long suppressed. "How's it coming along?" he asked, entering the room. Sienna looked up, her face brightening at the sight of him. "Very well. I've reconciled all the cattle sales from the spring drive, and I think I found where the discrepancy was in the supply orders." Xavier moved to stand beside her, looking over her shoulder at the neat columns of figures. "I'm impressed. You've accomplished more in 2 weeks than I managed in 2 months." She laughed, a sound that had become more frequent as her confidence in her position grew. "That's because you'd rather be out with the herd than stuck behind a desk." "Guilty as charged," he admitted, leaning against the desk. "Though the view in here has improved considerably." The comment hung between them, more forward than their usual interactions. Sienna's cheeks colored slightly, but she held his gaze. "Xavier." A commotion outside interrupted whatever she had been about to say. Shouts came from the direction of the bunkhouse, followed by the sound of running footsteps on the porch. Xavier straightened just as Timothy burst through the front door. "Boss, riders coming in fast, looks like trouble." Xavier's expression hardened. "How many?" "6, maybe 7. Led by Sheriff Denton." Sienna stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. "Denton, why would he?" "Stay inside," Xavier told her firmly. "Both of you. Timothy, make sure Sophia and Mrs. Gunderson remain in the kitchen." Sienna caught his arm as he turned to leave. "Xavier, please be careful. Denton's not a reasonable man." He covered her hand with his briefly. "Don't worry. This is my land, and he has no authority here without cause." Outside, Xavier walked calmly to the edge of the porch as 7 riders pulled up in the yard, raising dust in the golden light of sunset. Sheriff Denton sat atop his bay gelding, his face set in grim lines. Beside him rode Judge Wilson, looking uncomfortable, and behind them several deputies and men Xavier recognized as business owners from Dustwillow. "Evening, Sheriff," Xavier called evenly. "This is an unexpected visit." Denton dismounted, hand resting meaningfully on his holstered pistol. "Foster, we've come for the Blackwood girls." "On what grounds?" Xavier's voice remained steady, but his posture tensed. Judge Wilson cleared his throat. "There's been a formal complaint filed against the elder Miss Blackwood. She's wanted for questioning regarding missing funds from Hargrove's store." Xavier's jaw tightened. "Missing funds? You already whipped her for stealing food." "This is different," Denton said with a smirk. "Hargrove claims money's gone missing from his safe. Says it started around the time the Blackwood girl was doing laundry for his wife. Could be as much as $50. "That's ridiculous," Xavier replied coldly. "Sienna Blackwood has been working for me these past weeks. I trust her completely with my accounts." "Well, ain't that touching," Denton sneered. "But Hargrove's got a sworn statement, and I've got the authority to bring her in." Xavier stepped forward, his hand nowhere near his gun but his stance making it clear he wasn't backing down. "You've got no evidence except the word of a man who was perfectly happy to see a girl whipped for taking food to save her dying sister. And you've got no jurisdiction on my property without a proper warrant." "Actually," Judge Wilson interjected, pulling a paper from his coat, "we do have a warrant, Mr. Foster. Signed this afternoon." Before Xavier could respond, the front door opened and Sienna stepped onto the porch. "I'll go with you," she said quietly. "Sienna, no." Xavier turned to her in alarm. She met his gaze steadily. "I've done nothing wrong. I've never stolen money from anyone. Better to face this now than have them return with more men." Denton's smile widened unpleasantly. "Smart girl. Come along then, we've got a cell waiting." Xavier moved to stand between Sienna and the sheriff. "If she goes, I go too, and my lawyer meets us there." "Suit yourself," Denton shrugged. "Makes no difference to me if you want to waste your time defending a thief." "She is not a thief," Xavier said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And if anything happens to her in your custody, Denton, you'll answer to me personally." The threat hung in the air, all the more powerful for its restraint. Several of the deputies shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. Judge Wilson cleared his throat again. "Perhaps it would be best if Mr. Foster accompanies Miss Blackwood, to ensure proper procedure is followed." Denton scowled but didn't argue. "Fine. Let's get moving before it's full dark." Xavier turned to Timothy, who stood anxiously in the doorway. "Tell Jackson to ride for Peterson in Laramie. He's the best lawyer in the territory. And make sure Sophia stays here with Mrs. Gunderson, no matter what." Timothy nodded solemnly. "We'll look after her, boss. Don't worry." Inside, Sophia was being physically restrained by Mrs. Gunderson to prevent her from rushing outside. "Sienna," she cried when her sister entered to quickly gather her shawl, "you can't go with them." Sienna embraced her sister tightly. "It will be all right, Sophia. Xavier will be with me and we'll clear this up quickly. I've done nothing wrong." "But Sheriff Denton can't do anything to me without proof, which he won't find because there isn't any." Sienna pulled back, holding her sister's shoulders firmly. "Promise me you'll stay here with Mrs. Gunderson. Promise me, Sophia." Reluctantly, the younger girl nodded, tears streaming down her face. The ride to Dustwillow was tense and silent. Xavier insisted Sienna ride with him rather than with one of the deputies, and though Denton objected, Judge Wilson again intervened in their favor. Dustwillow's jailhouse was a squat stone building at the end of Main Street. Inside, two cells faced each other across a narrow corridor with the sheriff's desk positioned at the front. It smelled of stale sweat, tobacco, and despair. "In you go," Denton said, unlocking one of the cells and gesturing for Sienna to enter. "Is this really necessary?" Xavier demanded. "She's not going anywhere." "Standard procedure," Denton replied with false pleasantness. "Can't have accused thieves roaming free, can we?" Sienna squeezed Xavier's arm reassuringly before walking with dignity into the cell. The iron door clanged shut behind her with ominous finality. "Now, unless you've got a reason to stay, Foster, you can head on back to your ranch," Denton said, seating himself behind his desk. "We'll send word when there's news." "I'm not going anywhere," Xavier stated flatly, pulling up a chair directly across from Denton. "I'll wait for my lawyer." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Suit yourself, but it might be a long night." It was indeed a long night. Xavier refused to leave, even when Judge Wilson and the others departed. Denton eventually dozed off at his desk while his deputy kept watch from a corner. Throughout the dark hours, Xavier and Sienna exchanged occasional reassuring glances but said little, aware that anything they discussed could be used against them. Near dawn, the door to the jailhouse opened, admitting a tall, distinguished man in a well-tailored suit. He carried a leather briefcase and wore the confident expression of someone used to winning arguments. "Lawrence Peterson," he announced crisply. "I understand my client is being held without formal charges or evidence." Denton jerked awake, blinking in confusion. "What? Who the hell are you?" "Mr. Foster's attorney," Peterson replied smoothly. "And by extension, Miss Blackwood's attorney. I'd like to see the evidence against my client immediately." "Evidence is being gathered," Denton muttered, straightening his rumpled shirt. "So you have none at present," Peterson clarified. "Interesting. And Mr. Hargrove's sworn statement, may I see that?" "It's being processed." Peterson's eyebrows rose. "Being processed. I see. Judge Wilson is aware, I assume, that you're holding a young woman in jail based on accusations with no supporting evidence." Denton's face darkened. "Now see here." "No, Sheriff, you see here," Peterson interrupted firmly. "Unless you can produce evidence or formal charges within the next hour, I will be securing Miss Blackwood's immediate release and filing a complaint for unlawful detention and harassment." The attorney turned to Xavier and Sienna, the latter watching wide-eyed from her cell. "Mr. Foster, a word outside, if you please." Outside on the boardwalk, Peterson spoke quietly. "The situation is as I suspected. They have nothing but Hargrove's word. My sources tell me he's in financial trouble and may be covering his own mismanagement by accusing Miss Blackwood." Xavier's expression hardened. "Can you get her released?" "By noon, certainly. But there's another matter we should discuss." Peterson lowered his voice further. "There's talk in town about the arrangement at your ranch, 2 unmarried women living under your roof." "Mrs. Gunderson serves as chaperone," Xavier said stiffly. "There's nothing improper." "Of course not," Peterson agreed, "but perception matters in these situations. Especially now that Miss Blackwood has been publicly accused, however falsely. Her reputation is at stake." Xavier ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "What are you suggesting?" Peterson chose his words carefully. "If your interest in Miss Blackwood goes beyond employer and employee, which, forgive me, seems evident, there are more permanent solutions that would silence the gossips and protect both the young ladies." Understanding dawned in Xavier's eyes. "You're suggesting marriage." "It would solve several problems at once," Peterson confirmed. "But of course, only if that aligns with your own inclinations." Xavier was silent for a long moment, staring at the distant mountains just visible beyond the town's rooftops. The idea of marriage was not unwelcome, far from it. In the weeks since Sienna had come to the ranch, his feelings had grown from admiration to something deeper, something he had barely acknowledged even to himself. Let's focus on getting her released first, he said finally. Then we can discuss other matters. Peterson nodded. A sensible approach. Now, let's return and put some pressure on our good sheriff. True to Peterson's prediction, by noon Sienna was released due to insufficient evidence. Hargrove himself never appeared at the jailhouse, and rumor had it that his wife had been seen boarding the eastbound train that morning, alone. "Thank you," Sienna said to Peterson as they left the jailhouse. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." The lawyer smiled kindly. "No repayment necessary, Miss Blackwood. Mr. Foster is a valued client, and it's been my pleasure to assist." Xavier had remained uncharacteristically quiet since their return from the brief meeting outside. Now, as they prepared to ride back to the ranch, he finally spoke. "Sienna, there's something important we need to discuss." She looked up at him, concern creasing her brow. "Is it Sophia?" "Is she all right?" "Sophia's fine," he assured her. "It's about your situation, both of you." Sienna's face fell. "You want us to leave?" "After all this trouble, I understand if—" "No," Xavier interrupted firmly. "That's not it at all." He glanced around the busy street. "But this isn't the place. Can we talk when we get home?" Home. The word hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Sienna nodded, and they mounted their horses for the ride back to the ranch. At the Foster ranch, Sophia flew from the porch the moment they rode into view, running to meet them with Mrs. Gunderson following at a more dignified pace. "Sienna!" Sophia cried, throwing her arms around her sister as soon as she dismounted. "I was so worried. Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine," Sienna assured her, returning the embrace. "It was all a misunderstanding. Mr. Peterson sorted everything out." Mrs. Gunderson approached Xavier as he dismounted. "There's lunch waiting. You both look like you could use it." She peered at him shrewdly. "And you've got something on your mind, I can tell." Xavier offered a tired smile. "That obvious, is it?" "To those who know you," the housekeeper replied. "I'll keep Sophia busy in the kitchen while you two talk." Xavier nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Gunderson." After a quick meal, Xavier asked Sienna to join him in the study. She followed, anxiety evident in the set of her shoulders despite her attempts to appear calm. The study was Xavier's private sanctuary, a room lined with bookshelves, dominated by a large oak desk, and furnished with comfortable leather chairs. He gestured for her to sit, but remained standing himself, too restless to settle. "Sienna, these past weeks since you and Sophia came here." He began, then paused, searching for the right words. "They've changed things, changed me." She watched him carefully, her blue eyes revealing nothing of her thoughts. "Peterson pointed out something today that I should have realized myself," Xavier continued. "Your position here is precarious." Despite Mrs. Gunderson's presence, people talk. After what happened with Denton and Hargrove, that talk will only get worse. Sienna's hands tightened in her lap. "I understand. We've imposed on your hospitality too long." "That's not what I'm saying," Xavier said, frustration edging his voice. "I don't want you to leave, either of you, but I want to offer you security protection." He took a deep breath. "I want to offer you my name." Sienna's eyes widened. "Your name?" "Marriage," Xavier clarified, moving to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "I know it's sudden, and perhaps not the romantic proposal you deserved, but I care for you, Sienna, more than I thought possible in such a short time." Sienna stared at him in disbelief. "You want to marry me to protect my reputation?" Xavier's expression faltered. "Not just that. I want to marry you because I can't imagine this house, this life, without you in it. Because seeing you in that cell last night made me realize how much I've come to love you." The word hung in the air between them, honest and exposed. "Love," Sienna whispered. "Xavier, we barely know each other." "Don't we?" he challenged gently. I know you're brave enough to endure public humiliation to save your sister. I know you're brilliant with numbers and can recite Tennyson from memory. I know you take your coffee with 2 sugars, and you hum when you think no one's listening. And you know I'm stubborn and sometimes too proud, that I respect loyalty above all else, that I dream of making this ranch a legacy to pass down through generations. His thumbs traced gentle circles on the backs of her hands. We may not have years of courting behind us, but I believe we know what matters. Tears gathered in Sienna's eyes. What about Sophia? She would be my sister, legally and in my heart. This is her home too, for as long as she wishes it. And if I refuse, would you still allow us to stay? Xavier released her hands and stood, moving to the window. Of course. Nothing would change in that regard, but I hope you won't refuse. Sienna rose and moved to stand beside him, gazing out at the sprawling ranch lands beyond. When my parents died, I thought Sophia and I would be alone forever. When the sheriff tied me to that post, I thought my life was over. She turned to face him. But then you stepped forward, a stranger willing to take my punishment. Her hand reached up to touch his face, fingers gentle against his weathered skin. I've been falling in love with you since that moment, Xavier Foster. I just never dared hope you might feel the same. Joy blazed across Xavier's features. Is that a yes? Sienna smiled through her tears. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Xavier pulled her into his arms, his kiss gentle at first, then deepening as she responded with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. We should tell Sophia, Sienna said, her cheeks flushed. And Mrs. Gunderson. Xavier laughed. Mrs. Gunderson probably already knows. That woman misses nothing. True to Xavier's prediction, when they emerged from the study hand in hand, Mrs. Gunderson took one look at them and sniffed approvingly. About time. I'll start planning the wedding dinner. Sophia's reaction was more exuberant. She squealed with delight and threw her arms around both of them. I knew it. I told you he was in love with you, Sienna. Did you now? Xavier asked, amused. Sophia nodded enthusiastically. It was obvious. The way you looked at her when she wasn't watching, like she hung the moon and stars. Xavier flushed but didn't deny it. Smart girl, your sister. Does this mean we're staying forever? Sophia asked. This will really be our home. Yes, Xavier confirmed. This is your home now, both of you. The wedding took place 2 weeks later, a simple ceremony in the ranch's front parlor with Judge Wilson officiating. Peterson served as witness, along with Mrs. Gunderson, Sophia, and several of the ranch hands who had grown fond of the sisters. Sienna wore a dress of pale blue, silk, a gift from Xavier that had arrived by special courier from Denver. Sophia had woven wildflowers into her sister's hair, and Mrs. Gunderson had lent her a lace handkerchief as something borrowed. As they exchanged vows, Xavier held Sienna's hands firmly in his voice steady and sure as he promised to love, honor, and protect her all the days of his life. When Judge Wilson pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in cheers, none more enthusiastic than Sophia's. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music from Timothy's fiddle and dancing in the yard under lantern light. As the night grew late, Xavier found his bride sitting on the porch swing, watching the festivities with a contented smile. Happy, Mrs. Foster? He asked, settling beside her. Sienna leaned against his shoulder. More than I ever thought possible. Any regrets? It all happened very quickly. She shook her head. No regrets, though I must admit when I stole that loaf of bread I never imagined it would lead to all this. Xavier chuckled. Life has strange ways of bringing people together. You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been in town that day? Sienna asked softly. If you hadn't stepped forward. Xavier's arm tightened around her. I try not to think about it. Some things are meant to be, I believe. We would have found each other somehow. As the celebration wound down and guests began to depart, Sophia approached the newlyweds, her expression suddenly serious. "I want you both to know," she said earnestly, "how grateful I am, not just for taking us in, but for being a family again." Sienna rose to embrace her sister. "We'll always be family, Soph. Nothing will ever change that. And now we're just a slightly bigger family," Xavier added, including Sophia in the embrace. "The three of us together." Later that night, after Sophia had retired to her room and the house had grown quiet, Xavier and Sienna stood together in the doorway of the master bedroom. For a moment, shyness overtook them both, the reality of their new relationship suddenly immediate. "I know this isn't the most traditional beginning," Xavier said quietly, "but I want you to know I meant every word of my vows." Sienna looked up at him, her heart in her eyes. "As did I. This may have started as a practical arrangement, but my feelings for you are very real, Xavier." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I've never been more grateful for anything than finding you, even under such difficult circumstances." "Then perhaps we should be grateful to Sheriff Denton and his whip," Sienna said with a small smile. Xavier's expression darkened. "Never. I still have nightmares about what he did to you." "And I about what he did to you," she countered. "But perhaps it was worth it to bring us here." Instead of answering, Xavier drew her into his arms, his kiss speaking volumes about his love, his desire, and his gratitude for the woman who had so unexpectedly transformed his life. The following month saw many changes at the Foster Ranch. With Xavier's encouragement, Sienna took over full management of the ranch's accounts and business affairs, revealing a shrewd mind for investment that helped expand their operations. Sophia, now 16, divided her time between helping Mrs. Gunderson with household matters and pursuing her education through books. Xavier, ordered specially from Denver. Word of Sienna and Xavier's marriage had spread through the county, effectively silencing most of the gossip about their arrangement. Sheriff Denton maintained a cold distance, still smarting from the embarrassment of having to release Sienna without charges. Hargrove's store closed after his wife left him, taking most of their savings with her, and the man himself departed Dustwillow shortly thereafter, vindicating Sienna completely. As Christmas approached, the Foster household prepared for their first holiday together. The ranch house was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, and the scent of Mrs. Gunderson's baking filled every corner. Sophia had spent weeks secretly working on gifts for both her sister and brother-in-law, her excitement barely contained. One evening in mid-December, as snow fell gently outside, Sienna found Xavier in his study, gazing thoughtfully into the fire. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, moving to perch on the arm of his chair. He smiled up at her, drawing her into his lap instead. "I was just thinking about how different this Christmas will be from last year. Then, I was alone here with just Mrs. Gunderson and the hands. Now you're stuck with a wife and a sister-in-law," Sienna finished teasingly. "Exactly what I wanted," Xavier replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Actually, I've been meaning to discuss something with you." There was an undertone in his voice that made Sienna look at him more closely. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong, just I've been thinking about the future." "Our future?" Sienna's brow furrowed slightly. "What about it?" Xavier took a deep breath. "How would you feel about children? Our children, I mean." Sienna's expression softened. "I would love nothing more than to have a family with you, Xavier, someday." "Someday," he echoed, studying her face. "Sienna, are you?" She nodded, a radiant smile spreading across her face. "Dr. Henderson confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to be sure before I told you. We're going to have a baby, Xavier, in early summer. Joy transformed Xavier's features. He stood suddenly, lifting Sienna with him and spinning her around the study. A baby, my God, Sienna, that's wonderful news. Her laughter mingled with his as he set her down carefully. You're happy then? Happy doesn't begin to describe it, he said, his hands framing her face tenderly. I love you so much, Sienna Foster. You've made me the happiest man in Wyoming territory. The door to the study opened and Sophia peeked in. What's all the commotion about? I could hear you from upstairs. Xavier and Sienna exchanged a glance, silently communicating. Sienna nodded and Xavier turned to Sophia with a broad grin. Come in, Sophia, we have some news to share. Sophia entered, her curiosity evident. What news? Sienna took her sister's hands. You're going to be an aunt, Soph. We're having a baby. Sophia's squeal of delight probably could be heard all the way to the bunkhouse. A baby? Oh, Sienna. She hugged her sister tightly, then Xavier. When? How long have you known? Is it a boy or a girl? Early summer, Sienna laughed. I just found out for certain, and it's far too early to know if it's a boy or girl. This is the best Christmas present ever, Sophia declared, her eyes shining. Wait until Mrs. Gunderson hears. She'll be over the moon. Actually, Xavier said, we'd like to keep it between just us for a little while, at least until after Christmas. Can you keep a secret, Sophia? The younger girl mimed, locking her lips and throwing away the key. Your secret is safe with me. But I make no promises about not spoiling my niece or nephew terribly when they arrive. That night, as Xavier and Sienna lay together in their bed, his hand rested protectively over her still flat stomach. I never thought I could be this happy, he murmured against her hair. When my father died and left me this ranch, I thought I'd spend my life focused on building it up, maybe find a suitable wife someday who wouldn't mind the isolation. I never imagined. What? Sienna prompted when he trailed off. I never imagined falling in love like this. Finding someone who feels like the other half of my soul. Sienna turned in his arms to face him. I feel the same way. After our parents died, all I could think about was survival, keeping Sophia safe, finding enough work to feed us both. Love seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. And now I know it's essential, she said softly. As necessary as breathing. Xavier's hand moved to cup her cheek. No more stealing bread, though, Mrs. Foster. Promise me that. Sienna laughed, the sound rich and free in the darkness. I promise. Though I can't say I entirely regret that particular theft. It led me to you after all. Next time you need something, Xavier said, his tone suddenly serious, you come to me. Always. Whatever it is, wherever I am, promise me. Touched by the depth of feeling in his voice, Sienna nodded. I promise, Xavier. Though I hope I never have to test your resolve with anything too outlandish. Try me, he challenged, his smile visible in the moonlight filtering through the curtains. Very well. I have a sudden, desperate craving for Mrs. Gunderson's apple pie. Right now. In the middle of the night, Xavier groaned. You're going to use this pregnancy to torment me, aren't you? Perhaps a little, Sienna admitted, just to keep things interesting. As if life with you could ever be anything but, he replied, dropping a kiss on her forehead before throwing back the covers. One apple pie coming up, Mrs. Foster. Your wish is my command. Spring brought new life to the Foster ranch in more ways than one. Calving season kept Xavier and his hands busy from dawn to dusk, while the vegetable garden Sienna and Sophia had planned during the winter months began to sprout. Sienna's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her small bump now clearly visible beneath her dresses. One bright May morning, as Sienna sat on the porch sorting through seed packets for the flower beds, a wagon appeared on the horizon, approaching the ranch house. Shading her eyes against the sun, She recognized Timothy riding alongside it. Xavier emerged from the barn, also noticing the arrival. "Were we expecting visitors?" he called to Sienna. She shook her head, setting aside her gardening plans and rising to meet the wagon. As it drew nearer, they could see a woman and a young boy seated beside the driver, a traveling salesman by the looks of his rig. Foster Ranch. The salesman called as they pulled up. Xavier stepped forward. "That's right. What can we do for you?" The woman, perhaps 30 with careworn features and simple clothing, spoke up hesitantly. "We're looking for Sienna and Sophia Blackwood. We were told in town they might be here." Sienna moved to stand beside Xavier. "I'm Sienna Foster now. Blackwood was my maiden name. Sophia is my sister." The woman's tired face lit up. "Oh, thank the Lord. I wasn't sure we'd find you." She climbed down from the wagon with Xavier's assistance, the boy about 10 years old following closely. "I'm Martha Reed, your mother's cousin, and this is my son, Samuel." Sienna stared in shock. "Mother's cousin? I didn't know she had any family left." "Not many of us," Martha acknowledged. "We lost touch years ago when she moved west with your father. I only recently learned of their passing when I wrote to their last known address and received a reply from the postmaster in Dustwillow." Xavier, seeing Sienna's emotional reaction, took charge of the situation. "You must be exhausted from your journey. Please come inside. Mrs. Gunderson will have refreshments ready, and we can talk comfortably." Inside, after Sophia had been called from the kitchen and introductions made all around, Martha explained her situation. "My husband passed last winter influenza. The farm in Nebraska couldn't sustain us alone, so we sold up. I remembered Caroline, your mother, had moved to Wyoming with her husband, and thought perhaps her family might help us get established somewhere out here." "We're glad you found us," Sienna said warmly, though her mind was still reeling from the unexpected connection to her past. "Of course we'll help however we can." Xavier, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Mrs. Reed, do you have experience with ranch work?" Martha straightened. "I've run a farm for 15 years, Mr. Foster. There's not much I can't turn my hand to, and Samuel's young, but he's a hard worker." "We could use the help," Xavier said thoughtfully. "The ranch is growing, and with the baby coming." He glanced at Sienna, who nodded encouragingly. "There's a small house, more of a cabin, really about a quarter-mile from here. It was the original homestead before this house was built. It needs some work, but it could be a good place for you and your son to start." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "You do that for us." "Strangers, really, not strangers," Sienna corrected gently. "Family, distant perhaps, but family nonetheless." Sophia, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "I remember Mother talking about Nebraska cousins. She had a music box she said was from Cousin Martha's mother." Martha nodded eagerly. "Yes, my mother gave it to her when Caroline married your father. A little silver box that played Beautiful Dreamer." "We still have it," Sophia said, excitement building. "It's in Sienna's, in the bedroom I use now." As Sophia rushed upstairs to retrieve the music box, Xavier caught Sienna's hand under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze. She returned the pressure gratefully, overwhelmed by this unexpected connection to her parents' past. The arrival of Martha and Samuel Reed brought new energy to the Foster Ranch. The cabin was quickly made habitable with all hands pitching in, and Martha proved her worth immediately, taking over much of the garden work that had become difficult for Sienna as her pregnancy advanced. Samuel, initially shy, soon formed a bond with Timothy, who patiently taught him about horses and cattle. "It feels right, doesn't it?" Xavier said to Sienna one evening as they watched Martha, Sophia, and Samuel playing a spirited game of checkers in the parlor. "Having them here. Expanding our family." Sienna leaned against his shoulder. It does. Mother would be happy knowing we found each other. Any regrets about marrying a rancher? Xavier asked, a question he still posed occasionally as if needing reassurance that Sienna was truly content with the life they'd built. None whatsoever, she replied firmly, though I do wonder sometimes what would have happened if you hadn't been in town that day. I told you before we would have found each other somehow. Xavier's hand rested on her rounded belly. Some things are meant to be. As if in agreement, the baby kicked against his palm, making them both laugh softly. I think she's going to be as strong-willed as her mother, Xavier said. Sienna raised an eyebrow. So sure it's a girl, just a feeling, he shrugged. Though I'll be equally happy with a son. As long as the baby is healthy, Sienna said, covering his hand with hers. That's all that matters. June arrived with blazing heat and the promise of new life. Sienna, now in her final month of pregnancy, found herself increasingly confined to the house, much to her frustration. Sophia and Martha took turns keeping her company, but she missed the freedom of movement she'd always taken for granted. I feel like a beached whale, she complained to Xavier one evening as he helped her settle into bed. Useless and enormous. You're beautiful, he countered, pressing a kiss to her forehead, and hardly useless. You managed the spring cattle sale from this very bed last week, securing the best prices we've ever gotten. Sienna smiled reluctantly. Well, there is that, but I miss riding and walking to the creek. And seeing my feet. Xavier laughed, then grew more serious. Dr. Henderson says it won't be much longer. He'll be staying in town for the next few weeks, just to be close by. The mention of the doctor's proximity was both reassuring and nerve-wracking. Childbirth was a dangerous business, as both of them well knew. Xavier's own mother had died bringing his younger brother into the world, a brother who had also not survived. Reading his thoughts, Sienna reached for his hand. It's going to be fine, Xavier. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, and I'm strong and healthy. He nodded, forcing a smile. I know. Just promise me you'll rest as much as possible these next few weeks. I promise, she agreed. Though if this baby doesn't make an appearance soon, I may go mad from boredom. The baby, however, had plans of its own. 2 nights later, Sienna woke shortly after midnight with a sharp pain that left no doubt about what was happening. Xavier, she whispered, shaking his shoulder. It's time. He was instantly awake, his face a mixture of excitement and fear. Are you sure? Dr. Henderson said it might be another week or, I'm very sure, Sienna interrupted as another contraction gripped her. Send someone for the doctor. Now. What followed was a blur of activity. Timothy was dispatched to Dustwillow for Dr. Henderson. Mrs. Gunderson and Martha took charge of preparing the bedroom, and Sophia was tasked with keeping water boiling and fresh linens ready. Xavier refused to leave Sienna's side, even when Mrs. Gunderson tried to shoo him out, declaring that childbirth was women's business. My place is with my wife, he said firmly. Unless Sienna wants me to go. Sienna, breathing through another contraction, managed a smile. Stay, please. The labor progressed steadily through the night. Dr. Henderson arrived just before dawn, his experienced presence bringing a sense of calm to the tense household. He examined Sienna and nodded approvingly. Everything's proceeding normally, Mrs. Foster. First babies often take their time, but you're doing splendidly. As the sun rose over the eastern hills, Sienna's labor intensified. Xavier held her hand through each contraction, murmuring encouragement, wiping her brow with cool cloths, his own fear carefully masked behind a facade of confidence. You're the strongest person I've ever known, he told her as the pains came closer together. You can do this, Sienna. I believe in you. Finally, as morning gave way to afternoon, Dr. Henderson announced it was time to push. Xavier supported Sienna's shoulders, his heart pounding with a mixture of terror and anticipation. With a final, tremendous effort from Sienna, their child entered the world red-faced, indignant, and loudly announcing its arrival with lusty cries. "A son, Doctor," Henderson proclaimed, quickly cleaning the squalling infant before placing him on Sienna's chest. "A fine, healthy boy." Xavier stared in wonder at the tiny, perfect being he and Sienna had created. Emotion overwhelmed him, and tears flowed freely down his face. "He's beautiful," he whispered, gently touching his son's downy head. "Sienna, you did it. You're amazing." Sienna, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at him. "We did it, together." Later, after mother and baby had been cleaned up and settled comfortably, the rest of the household was allowed in to meet the newest member of the Foster family. Sophia approached the bed tentatively, her eyes wide with wonder. "Oh, Sienna, he's perfect. What's his name?" Xavier and Sienna exchanged a glance. They had discussed names but hadn't settled on a final choice. "We'd like to name him James," Xavier said, "after Sienna's father." "James Xavier Foster," Sienna added, looking up at her husband with love, "if that's all right with you." Xavier's throat tightened with emotion. "It's perfect," Mrs. Gunderson sniffed approvingly. "Strong name for a strong boy. He'll grow up fine with parents like you too." Martha, standing by the window with Samuel, nodded in agreement. Caroline and James would be so proud, Sienna, of both their girls. As evening fell, the household quieted. Dr. Henderson left with instructions for Sienna to rest as much as possible, promising to return in a few days to check on mother and baby. Sophia reluctantly went to bed after being assured she could hold her nephew first thing in the morning. Mrs. Gunderson and Martha retired to their respective rooms, leaving the new family alone. Xavier sat on the edge of the bed, watching in awe as tiny James nursed at Sienna's breast. The intimacy of the moment, this new life they had created together, this family they were building, filled him with a peace he'd never known before. "Thank you," he said softly. Sienna looked up, her eyes questioning. "For what?" "For everything. For being brave enough to marry me when you barely knew me, for making this house a home, for our son." His voice broke slightly. "For giving me a family again." Sienna reached for his hand. "You gave me the same gifts, Xavier. When you stepped between me and that whip, you changed both our lives." Xavier leaned forward to press a gentle kiss to her lips, then to the top of his son's head. "For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better," Sienna agreed, her smile radiant despite her exhaustion. "I love you, Xavier Foster. And I love you, Sienna Foster, more than I could ever express." As night settled over the ranch, the small family remained together in the soft lamplight, marveling at the miracle they had created and the journey that had brought them to this moment of perfect happiness. Years passed, and the Foster ranch flourished. James grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quick mind. 2 years after his birth, he was joined by a sister, Caroline, named for Sienna's mother. And 2 years after that, the family welcomed another son, William. Sophia, now a beautiful young woman of 22, had developed into a talented teacher, running a small school in the ranch's former bunkhouse for the children of ranch employees, neighboring homesteaders, and, of course, her niece and nephews. She had several suitors but seemed in no hurry to marry, content with her role in the extended Foster family. Martha and Samuel remained, becoming integral to ranch operations. Martha managed the expanded gardens and henhouses, while Samuel, now a capable young man of 17, worked alongside Xavier and the other hands with the cattle. The old wounds from that day in Dustwillow's town square had long since healed, leaving only faint scars as reminders of where their journey together had begun. Sheriff Denton had eventually lost his position after one too many instances of excessive force, and a more reasonable man now wore the badge. One summer evening, 10 years to the day from when Xavier had first stepped between Sienna and the sheriff's whip, the extended family gathered on the ranch house porch to celebrate the anniversary. The children played in the yard, their laughter carried on the warm breeze. Martha and Mrs. Gunderson argued good-naturedly about the proper way to make peach preserves, while Sophia read aloud from a new novel that had arrived on the eastbound train. Xavier found Sienna standing apart, watching it all with a contented smile. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy anniversary," he murmured. She leaned back against him. 10 years. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes like we've always been together. Any regrets?" he asked, the old question now a comfortable ritual between them. "Not a single one," she replied, turning in his arms to face him. At 29, Sienna was more beautiful than ever in Xavier's eyes, her face lined only faintly with the evidence of laughter and a life well lived. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I rode into town that day, I was only going to pick up some fencing supplies. I almost sent Timothy instead." Sienna raised an eyebrow. "Really? You've never told me that," Xavier nodded. "Changed my mind at the last minute. Something told me I should go myself." "Divine providence," Sienna suggested with a small smile. "Maybe," Xavier acknowledged, "or maybe just the best luck of my life." "Mine too," Sienna said softly, though it didn't feel like luck at the time. Xavier's expression grew serious. "I still hate thinking about what happened to you that day, if I'd arrived even a few minutes later." Sienna placed her fingers gently over his lips. "But you didn't. You were there exactly when I needed you most, and every day since." From the yard, James called out excitedly, "Pa! Look what I caught." The 8-year-old came running up, cupping something carefully in his hands. Xavier knelt down to his son's level. "What have you got there, James?" The boy opened his hands slightly to reveal a small green tree frog. "Isn't he amazing? Can I keep him?" Xavier and Sienna exchanged amused glances over their son's head. "Only if you make him a proper home," Sienna said. "With water and plants and everything he needs." James nodded eagerly. "I will, I promise." "Then go ask your Aunt Sophia to help you find a jar," Xavier suggested. "She'll know what to do." As James ran off to find his aunt, Xavier straightened and took Sienna's hand. "You know what I was thinking?" he asked, leading her down the porch steps and toward the old oak tree that shaded the side yard. "What's that?" "That we should plan a trip. Maybe to San Francisco, just the two of us." Sienna looked surprised. "Leave the children, the ranch." "Just for a few weeks," Xavier clarified. "Sophia and Martha can handle the children. Jackson can manage the ranch. We've never had a proper honeymoon, Sienna." She considered this, looking around at the home they'd built together. "It might be nice," she admitted, "though I'd miss them terribly." "We've earned a little time to ourselves," Xavier said, pulling her close. 10 years of marriage, 3 children, and a ranch that's 3 times the size it was when we started. I'd say that deserves a celebration." Sienna smiled up at him, the same smile that had captured his heart a decade ago. "When you put it that way, Mr. Foster, how can I refuse?" As the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the ranch yard, Xavier bent to kiss his wife, both of them surrounded by the family they had built, and the love that had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances with a stolen loaf of bread, a sheriff's whip, and a stranger's courage. "I love you, Sienna Foster," Xavier whispered against her lips. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the days to come." "And I love you," she replied. "My cowboy, my hero, my heart." Around them, their children played, their family chatted, and their home stood strong against the Wyoming sky, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the beautiful life that had grown from one crucial moment when a man had stepped forward to take another's punishment, changing both their destinies forever.